of groups, a cohort that represents the diversity of lived experiences in the United States. Yet they have responded with striking consistency. Time and again, we are hearing about people who have fallen victim to discrimination at the hands of the emerging technology. Immigrants who've been automatically sorted out of job applicant pools with no way to seek recourse. People of color and working class folks whose applications to apartment rentals have languished in cyberspace. Story after story of Black men arrested and jailed after being misidentified by predictive policing tools. Injustice can be baked into these technologies by negligence or even by design. We've also launched a separate initiative called The Time Is Now to investigate issues of equity in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. This 5-part series invites researchers, thought leaders, and advocates to the table to diagnose endemic issues and suggest informed solutions to ensure that all people can survive and thrive in these fields. Together, we're identifying barriers facing people in the STEM fields who have disabilities, who are immigrants, people without generational wealth, and others who began the race to a career far behind the starting line. These conversations will be followed by commitments, spurring action across the private, public, and nonprofit fields that shake the foundations of inequality in STEM and open up opportunities across sectors. We have learned a great deal from these candid conversations with scientists, with communities, with advocates. But above all else, these discussions have laid bare a vast architecture of discrimination, an edifice of inequality that has grown steeper and more overwhelming over the course of the COVID-19 pandemic. Crisis can confuse or it can clarify. This crisis showed us problems whose depths many had not seen and pointed to where interventions are badly needed. A government in service to the American public will confront these structures head on, and that's exactly what we're doing in the Biden-Harris administration. First, we're taking bold and necessary steps to restore trust in government and in science. The strategy, in short, is to show our work, to be transparent, and to push others to do the same. That means building on important progress achieved during the Obama administration with tools like data.gov, publishing full data sets and making them available to researchers and others, anybody else who wants to use them. Our scientific integrity roundtables and engagement have made it clear that now is the time to inject new urgency into that work and to make sure that the public can always see where the data comes from and draw their own conclusions. That means that sometimes people will agree with the decision that the government has made, and sometimes they will interpret the data differently. That's not something to be fearful of. It's the sign of a healthy democracy. Restoring open government has implications for everything from climate policy to vaccine uptake, existential issues that demand open discussion and vigorous debate. Whether people are challenging policies or rallying around them, they will always have access to the facts. Second, we're taking action to make sure those facts reflect the stories and experiences of all Americans. That starts with collecting data in a way that is fair and equitable. Every day across the Biden-Harris administration, public servants seek to serve communities who have long been an afterthought in policymaking. I hear people at every level ask critical questions about what our decisions mean for different groups, like how one policy might affect Black Americans in urban settings, different from Latino farmers in rural areas. Critical questions that for decades I had only ever really heard asked about in the depths of the academy. Unfortunately, federal data are often not broken down by key demographic variables, including race, ethnicity, sexual orientation and gender identity, disability, income, or veteran status. Our Equitable Data Working Group is seeking to change that. We've convened a cohort of policy experts, statisticians, social scientists, and data scientists and IT leaders across government with one goal: develop a way to measure equity and inequities throughout the federal government. In the coming months, we'll deliver an initial report to Ambassador Susan Rice, the head of the White House Domestic Policy Council, laying out the barriers and gaps to equitable data and offering specific recommendations for how to address them. Finally, we're speeding up the process of making those recommendations, developing real policies to address these real issues in the daily lives of Americans. For too long, the moral challenges of new technology have gone unaddressed. It's time to lay out some rules of the road to articulate a democratic vision for our use of technology. Every free society has guardrails. We can't be singled out for who we are or what we believe. We're protected against unreasonable searches and seizures in our day-to-day life. These protections, even if aspirational, must carry over into our digital lives. Basic rights and responsibilities for artificial intelligence as a safeguard against abuse, bias, and discrimination. Imagine if companies thought about equity at the start of the design process, not only after issues of discrimination emerged downstream. What would it look like? What kind of society could we have if all innovation began with ethical forethought? What kind of society could we have if we considered from the very beginning what might happen if new technology fell into the wrong hands, where the data might travel, how it might be misused in the marketplace to deepen inequality? These are the questions we must ask if we are to build a nation and a world where innovation happens without predation, where protections are baked in from the beginning, where marginalized communities have a voice in the development process, and designers work hard to ensure the benefits of new technologies reach all people. We're turning to the American people to help us get there. Soon we'll be asking folks across the country to tell us about their experiences when it comes to artificial intelligence, machine learning, and other emerging technologies, and to provide their insights and ideas to address these problems. These are big changes, necessary changes, made to bring ordinary people into the work of government, close the trust gap that has widened in recent years, and adjust the moral injustices of history. That is what's required of us as we face down the unique and complex challenges of this century and this generation. We're called to build a new critical approach to science, technology, and our social lives. An approach that places human beings at the center, a social science of solutions. We can do all of this. We have it in our power. We have in our power the tools to democratize science. We know how to ensure that when people provide inputs to the algorithm, when we program the device, we are including the people whose voices and values have long been devalued. We can close the vast resource gaps and erase the medical disparities and structural racism that for too long have held us back as a nation and a world. We can restore the integrity of public service and renew our commitment to social and racial justice. As sociologists, each of us has an essential role to play by continuing to generate research that steps into theories, policies, and practices that can contribute to justice and opportunity. I will close today with a story, one that represents where we're headed if we get this work right. It is the story of Zela Avant-Garde, a remarkable 14-year-old girl with a passion for science, basketball, and spelling. Last month, Zela made history when she correctly spelled the word Maria, becoming the first Black American to win the Scripps National Spelling Bee in the United States, here in the US. After the contest, Zela was interviewed by news outlets from around the world. All of them wanted to know the same thing. What on earth does Zela Avant-Garde want to be when she grows up? So Zela answered the question the way any teenager would. She said she wanted to be a basketball player at Harvard, then in the WNBA, and a coach in the NBA, and a researcher at NASA, and a scientist curing diseases with gene editing technology. She knew those things wouldn't be easy to achieve, so if all else failed, Zela said she would fall back on her other hobby, neuroscience. I hope when all is said and done, when the tech has been built, the policies have been passed, and the devices have been programmed, that all of it is done with young people like Zela in mind. I hope when we have made progress in our work, that every young person will look upon the world as Zela does and see it not for its limits, but for its abundance, its abundant possibilities. They will not be encumbered by the weight of an unequal past, but buoyed by a boundless future. And when they dream of a life in science and innovation, they will see the well-trodden pathways to get them there. That is the work and the vision of the Biden-Harris administration. A STEM workforce that reflects all of us, from the classroom to the boardroom, to the operating room, to the laboratory. A public that is engaged in the everyday work of government and sees their needs addressed in our decisions. An approach to innovation that is rooted in inclusion, integrity, and our common humanity. We have before us an extraordinary window of opportunity, a chance to take the peril of this moment and turn it into promise and possibility. A chance to write a new social contract, not just for this moment, but for the decades and generations that lie ahead. To employ social research, evidence, and knowledge for better alternative futures. I thank you for the role each of you is playing in this work. I wish you a productive and successful conference, and I thank you for inviting me to be with you here today.
Thank you very much, Alondra, Nelson, for these important and deep reflections on key issues related to the relationship between science, evidence, research, and democracy and justice, and the role that we have sociologists for that. Thank you. So now let me introduce to our second speaker, who will talk about inventing the future. Our next speaker is Dr. Federico Zaragoza. He is the president of the Council of the European Center for Peace and Development of the United Nations. He's the founder and president of the Foundation for Culture of Peace, and he has served as Director General of the UNESCO for 12 years. Dr. Mayor Zaragoza is a renowned scientist, a scholar, politician, diplomat, and poet. He has been a professor in different Spanish universities. He was rector of the University of Granada, chair of the European Research Council Expert Group, and co-founder of the Spanish High Council for Scientific Research. He also holds an extensive career as a diplomat and as a politician. He was co-chair of the high-level group for the Alliance of Civilizations and served as the Spanish Minister of Education and Science. He is an honorary member of the several scientific societies and a member of different academies, among them the World Academy of Art and Science. Please join me welcoming Dr. Federico Mayor Zaragoza.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marta. Vull començar molt cordialment a tots els que heu tingut la iniciativa d'aquesta nova edició, perquè parlar avui de coneixement, de democràcia i de futur és absolutament essencial. Per tant, en primer lloc, felicitar a Joandomènec president de l'Institut d'Estudis Catalans, a la Teresa Sordé, presidenta del comitè local, a la Marta Soler, presidenta de l'ESE, i a la Gemma, perquè com a ministra d'Universitats és especialment important que sigui ella una de les capdavanteres d'aquesta iniciativa. Therefore, yes, I have been now extremely interested in this opening speak of Alondra Nelson, because really is only the title, the solution. The solution is knowledge and democracy. Because we have now, until now, we have been always with powers only directed by markets, interests, and undemocratic. Because the democracy at the worldwide level is a multilateral system. And always, from the origin of time, we have had a male absolute power. Women was completely absent of all the positions in relevant positions in power. And then what has happened? Well, what has happened is that there had been empires that had been always the solution. Si vis pacem, para bellum. If you wish peace, prepare war. And this has been until now, until today, the solution given by most of the governments, some of them called democratic. And always it has been the solution of the reason of the force instead of the force of the reason. And it's for this that I repeat, I consider that the contribution of Alondra has been extremely relevant, because now what we must see is how we can solve, and solve very rapidly. Because for the first time in history, we are facing problems that are potentially irreversible. What I mean is that we have been during many years telling, we must be careful because the oceans, because the Arctic, because the Antarctic, nothing. The governments do not want to be corrected when they have so many market interests in their governance. And we have not been, never listened. And it's for the reason that now, for the first time in history, we are faced with potentially irreversible processes. And this is a very important thing, because we must realize that we have to be conscient, permanently conscient, of the interest of the next generations. How can today we look at the eyes of our children, of our grandchildren, if we do not react and immediately we correct the present trends? Because these present trends, the Arctic will not, the permafrost will not be in the Arctic again. The temperature, the climate change is a reality. It will be also the level of the seas will change dramatically. And all these things have been said during many years. Because now there are some people that say, oh yes, now we must realize, no. From the 47 already, in UNESCO was already created the the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And 10 years later, a very important program, Men and the Biosphere, and the International Geological Program, and the International Geographic Program, and the Oceanographic Commission. The oceans are extremely relevant. The oceans are extremely relevant because they are 2/3 of the skin of the earth. They are very relevant, the oceans. And it is for the reason that was very important that in the year 1979, the Academy of Science of the United States of North America already alerted the world saying, careful, because there are not only many emissions of CO2, but at the same time, and this is very dangerous, the phytoplankton of the oceans are decreasing, and therefore the reuptake of this CO2 in a photosynthetic process is decreasing. You know what was the reaction? Instead of saying, no, now, are the scientists who are saying this? The reaction was the creation by a company called ExxonMobil of a foundation to pay high amounts to pseudoscientists to say that this was not true. What we have done. We have done because we realize that the interest are always force, the armament, the reason of the force, and the assure that the market processes will go well. And the gross national product. This is what really interests, not the gross national product, the health of the people. No, what really matters is the gross national product. Well, you might realize that already in 1972, an Italian called Aurelio Peccei was already calling the world and saying, be careful. Be careful because we must control, we must reduce, we must readapt the growth. Limits to growth was that Aurelio Peccei presented to President Kennedy. And in the same time, when Aurelio Peccei was already saying all these things, were people that were saying, no. Now we must take this decision in a very important summit at the Earth level, saying that now we will be more careful, we will look at a possible solution. Yes. And the agreement of Paris on climate change was signed. And the resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations on the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030. That is very nice because it is said this resolution is to transform the world. Well, then at the end of this year, 2015, we were happy. The scientists, we were happy because we said, well, now for the first time, we have ship in North America that is able to say, no. Now we must go with all the other countries. We cannot have this hegemony. We must have not this kind of first always and doing what we and solution of security based on armament. You know, what we need in reality is a new concept of security. A new concept of security. Because now the security have a lot of force to defend the frontiers and the territories. But what about the inhabitants of these territories? What happens with them? What happens with those that are the persons living in these territories? They have a lot of problems with food access, with water access, with health service of quality, with environment care, with good education. This is what really must be the new security. human security. This is what we need. We are very well prepared for a conflict, military conflict. But what about floods? What about fires? What about the migrant problems that we have at the world level? At this moment, it's terrible to see all these people that cannot be in their country, even if sometimes they have a lot of very good mineral resources or a lot of production. They have lithium. They have coltan. You know, the Columbi tantalite that is essential for the superconductors that we utilize in the computers and in the mobiles. But no, when these arrive, instead of sharing with the countries that are rich in these products, with sharing with them, the very big powers, the oligopolium powers of this world, take in their hands all the resources, and these people cannot live. I know this very well. I have been looking with these eyes what happened, because people from very, very rich space in the world, they must die of hunger because there is not any kind of capacity for good sharing. There is no democracy. And it is for this that I sincerely think that this word democracy in the speech of Nelson, I think that has been very important because it's knowledge and democracy. And in the moment in which we will have democracy, the things will change. And this was the idea, by the way. This was the idea already at the beginning of the last century. There was a terrible war. The First World War was terrible because it was a war in which more than of bombs and armament, people was dying of hunger, of cold, of pests. And at the end of this terrible massacre of so many people, victims of this terrible war, one wonderful president of the United States, democratic one, was Woodrow Wilson. At this moment, there were no planes. He went from New York to Brest, and from Brest, he went to La Place de la Concorde in Paris. And there he showed, now I have the solution. Ladies and gentlemen, now I have the solution. La Convention pour la Paix, the Convention for Peace. And what he did, he created a League of Nations, a Society of Nations, with a court, legal court for solve the problems of at this level of the League of Nations. It was a wonderful first step to solve the problem. But the Republican Party did not accept this proposal. And when Wilson came back to the United States, immediately he was replaced, and was an immense incoherence in history. The country president was proposing the League of Nations, finally never belonged to the League of Nations. It was terrible. And then we had a Society of Nations, a League of Nations that was very weak. And what happened? Now, it's for this that we must, to have a new future, we must know very well what has happened. And what happened was that in Europe, with this League of Nations because the United States was not there. Hitler was able to say very clear in 1933, he already wrote Mein Kampf. And he said that the Aryan race is incompatible with the Jewish one. And immediately Benito Mussolini said the same, saying, not the Aryans, they are not important. This supremacism of Aryans, no, the supremacism must be of the Romans. The Romans are much more important than the Aryans. And very, very far in the east, Hirohito, the emperor of the Japan, was also persuaded, convinced by Tanaka of the same. We are much important, much better. Our race is much superior than the others in the Eastern countries. And you know what was the result? It was a terrible war with thousands and millions of victims, a terrible war. And when this war ended, then another Democrat, wonderful president of the United States of North America created a multilateral democratic system with different agencies for health, for education, communication, and science, for work, for the children, for the development, the UNICEF, the UNDP, etc., etc. Apparently all was solved, but immediately what really was this terrible end of this excellent initiative in 1945, followed, do not forget it, by the Declaration on Human Rights in 1948. But what happened? That all was under the immense career, immense race of the superpowers, military race of the superpowers. And during many years, many decades, the world was under this only superpower, the USSR and United States of North America. In the year 1986, at this moment I was quite close of these events, unexpected president of USSR called Mikhail Gorbachev. Immediately he said that the USSR, the Soviet Union, will be transformed in a Commonwealth of independent states. And in October 1986, in Reykjavik, he suggested to President Reagan that now tomorrow we must tell the world a good news, that nuclear weapons are going to be completely eliminated. Because this is one of the global threats that are inadmissible in this future. Why we must be always with this threat, permanent threat for humanity. Well, and you remember, yes, was a reduction of the weaponry to the 70%, but the 30% must be respected because, you know, the United States needs to have this 30% because, well, they must have this leadership and this hegemonic power. And Mr. Reagan was very clear. He said no to the elimination and he accepted this reduction. But, well, he created immediately the G6. And then other Republican presidents, Bush father, Bush son, also went in the same rate. And as I was saying you before, was after all this, after the two summits of the earth, was a moment in which we say, yes, at the end of 2015, yes, now we can, in the United States, and he has signed the agreements of Paris for climate change and the resolution of the United Nations to transform the world. Was a good moment, was a very, very good moment. However, only 6 months later on, there was a president again of the Republican Party, and even more, a very difficult to describe personality. And Donald Trump immediately said, I will not put into practice the agreements of Paris on climate change. I will not put into practice the Agenda 2030. All the hope of the scientific community, of all those that have been working, that we have been working, because we said now we are facing global threats, but global irreversible, some of them. And I know very well what is irreversibility, because from the year 1966, I have been working with irreversible damage of the brain of the children. And we created many years ago the diagnosis immediately after birth, because if we have a good diagnosis and we have a good treatment, these children are completely normal. But if not, they are forever. There is no solution afterwards, because the neuronal capacity has completely deteriorated. Well, then, at this moment, when Donald Trump says, no, I will not apply, we were expecting a reaction of the world, because we are 196 countries. And we must expect that there is the European Union now. Is the moment to say, well, no, we are very sorry, but the European Union will apply the agreements of Paris and will apply the resolution for a democratic multilateral system. And this does not happen. This does not happen because there are many structural problems, but because there is another concept of security. We have always had in mind that the security is to have more NATO forces and more military expenditures. Well, the result has been that after some years, 6 years of delay, now with Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the White House, with persons in the White House, as we have at present with Nelson, with our friend Nelson, now we can change the things, because they can agree that the governance of the world be based on knowledge, scientific knowledge, expertise knowledge, people that knows very how we see, and democracy. Democratic multilateralism. It's for this that I have said at the beginning, being really with is the key words for the solution. Democracy, and now we must say very clearly, because our intergenerational responsibility is now very important to be permanently taken into account. Otherwise, we cannot think, you know, when I was young, at the end of one book of Albert Camus, there was a phrase that was terrible, that said, je les méprise, I reject them because they were able, but they were unable to have the capacity of work, to have the capacity of dare. They could, but they didn't dare. And therefore, I think that now we must say the world that now for the first time, with this new possibility of multilateralism and assistance of the academic, intellectual, scientific, artistic community, all those that can create. Every human being is able to create. This is our hope. Every human being is able to think, to reflect, to imagine, to invent. Every human being is able to invent his or her own future. And this is what now we must do. At the worldwide level, a pact of unity, because the irreversible processes are global and needs to have this global reaction. And at the same time, we must be able to look at the eyes of the next generations and to say to them, we will dare. We will be able to change the present trends. We will be able to reinforce a multilateral system. We will be able for the first time to be able to human beings equal in dignity, whatever are their gender, their sensibility, sexual sensibility, ideology, their beliefs, all the human beings all together to face the global threats. And this is why I have been, during these days of pandemics, working very hard, saying, yes, now the human beings are able to express themselves. Until some decades, we were unable to say what we were thinking. But now with the mobiles, we can express ourselves. For the first time, humanity has voice. Now we can participate. If I participate, I exist. Therefore, now we must encourage we the peoples, as it is said in the wonderful charter created by Franklin Delano Roosevelt. We the peoples, we have resolved to save the succeeding generations from the scourge of war. Now we say, we the peoples, we have now, yes, because now we can express ourselves, we have decided to save the succeeding generations from the deteriorated habitability of the earth. We are going to put into practice the Agenda 2030. We are going to put into practice the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you very much.
Federico, for bringing the relevance of global awareness and the importance of the Agenda 2030 for democracy and for the next generation, and for this positive ending that we can do that, we are going to bring this agenda for the next generation. Thank you. This is the end of this keynotes and this in this opening of the ESSA conference. And in order to close that, you have seen that we have prepared in the program a small performance. So don't move from this connection that you are now. We just give us 2 minutes that those who are here in this room, we're moving to the patio of the Institute of Catalan Studies, where we will see a small performance with some scholars who are also musicians and artists. Don't stay with us, and we just move and we connect with you now in 1 minute, but just be in the same connection. Don't move. Thank you. And enjoy also the end of this opening and enjoy the rest of the conference. We'll see you in the continuing days. Thank you.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce the performance on Mariana Pineda. I am Fernando Macías, member of the technical team of the Integrated Plan for the Roma People at the Catalan government, also an associate professor at the University of Barcelona, and Roma researcher at the Roma Studies Group at the CREA University of Barcelona. We will have the honor to approach in the play by Jordi Vivancos, professor of Sociology of Music at the Higher School of Music of Catalonia, SMUC, and director of the International Music Contest Maria Canals. He is coordinator of the Clave project of the Palau de la Música Catalana with 1,800 children and 80 choirs. He studied sociology at the University of Barcelona, and he dedicated part of his work to breaking down stereotypes about classical music and cultural elitism. Jordi Vivancos will be accompanied by Anne López de Aguileta. She is researcher and teaching assistant in sociology at the University of Barcelona. She has studied professional clarinet at Arriaga Conservatory in Bilbao and at Zaragoza Conservatory. She holds an MA from the University of Zaragoza with a thesis on the transformation of working class adults' lives through classical music gatherings. Introducing the play, we have to say that Mariana Pineda is a theater play by the Spanish poet and playwright Federico García Lorca. It is a combination of historical reality and artistic creation on the life of Mariana Pineda, a relevant feminist in the resistance to the absolutist government of Ferdinand VII in the 19th century in Spain. The war against Napoleon ended with the return of the King Ferdinand VII, which led to absolutist reaction against the 1812 Constitution. The liberals will not give up in their efforts to proclaim the Constitution. Mariana, committed to the liberal cause, have a flag embroidered with the words equality, freedom, law. An action that placed her in the crosshairs of Ramon Pedrosa, who was known as the mayor of crime, because he had full powers from King Ferdinand VII. Pedrosa offered to Mariana freedom in exchange for betraying those fighting with Mariana. After she refused, she was sentenced to death and executed. The play was written between 1923 and 1925 and was first performed in 1927. Federico García Lorca was a Spanish poet and playwright, and he was a relevant member of a group of artists and scientists who made international key contributions, as Dalí, Ramón y Cajal, Machado, Ortega y Gasset, and Picasso. He was killed by Franco's military force at the beginning of the Spanish Civil War. García Lorca introduced the first scene of the Mariana Pineda play, describing the desolation that is felt in the city.
Oh, sad day in Granada, to make the stones weep. Seeing Marianita dying on the scaffold because she refuses to betray. Marianita, seated in her room, did not stop to consider, what if Pedrosa saw me embroidering the flag of liberty? Oh, sad day in Granada. The bells ring and ring.
García Lorca explains the ways in which Mariana Pineda is faithful to her revolutionary ideas.
She is embroidering and embroidering. I have seen her through the keyhole. The red thread between her fingers resembles a knife wound in the air. Her smile has become almost pale, like an open flower on a piece of lace. She should abandon those intrigues. What should she care of outside things? If she embroiders, let her embroider dresses for her child when she is grown. If the king is not a good king, let it be. Women should not be bothered with that.
Pedrosa, the representative of the king, the mayor of crime, offered Mariana freedom in exchange of betraying her revolutionary friends, thus sexual relations with him. The feminist revolution in Mariana will not subdue.
Mariana, and the flag? The one you embroidered with those white hands, against the laws of the king. Very well embroidered, of purple taffeta and green letters. There in the Albaicín we found it, and it is now in my power, like your life. But do not be afraid, I am your friend. I want you mine. Do you hear? Mine or dead. You have always scorned me, but now I am able to encircle your throat with my hands. This throat of transparent spikenard, and you will love me because I give you your life. By force, you will inform. The irons are very painful, and a woman is always a woman.
Inside the prison, the other women speak with admiration about Mariana Pineda.
I don't understand. She is a good woman, and they want to kill her. What do you say? I wish I could look closely at her heart for a long while. What a brave woman. Yesterday, when they came to read her death sentence, she did not hide her smile. Oh, Marianita Pineda, the flowers that will accompany you in death are opening.
Mariana is desesperated, realizing about the course of her life.
It cannot be. Cowards. And who orders such atrocities in Spain? What right do the police have? In that flag of liberty, I embroidered the greatest love of my life. Am I to remain here imprisoned? Oh, to have clear crystal wings to fly in search of you.
García Lorca finished the play evoking the tragedy.
Oh, sad day in Granada, to make the stones weep. Seeing Marianita dying on the scaffold for want of betrayal.